Albuquerque, Tina and Kona Aho I de Chimona ho I Hoawil I Quanike ho Shiwitma, Tina Yanike. Welcome. In my greeting, Keshi, happily I greet you, and you'll be called upon to celebrate good news that we're all here. Though this has past 3 years have been very unprecedented. A year ago, I was reflecting this morning as I was sharing with some of my colleagues in the first session that I lost an auntie who was 80 years in her life. And so this was actually around the same week, same time frame that we were told that she had passed on. So this morning, I just think about our students that are in the classroom with teachers. I call them the teachers in the trenches. They have those Kodak moments when learning is taking place, whether their learning style is hands-on, listening, observing, to know that we have a big impact, whether we're teaching from and seeing through the lens of Native American culture and language and history, or your own Western Euro, or wherever your roots are. We always have our roots in our beginnings. Though we had no control over where we were born, we had no control over who our parents should be. You have no control over your DNA. But we know that as human beings, we have emotions, feelings, attitudes. And my vision for all of us is that we have a very good time learning from each other as we amplify community voices. So I'll be praying. I prayed this morning for all of you as APS teachers, administrators, board members, and then as I told you that there's a meeting on my other computer as much as we're gathering together this morning. Foremost, I want to thank the Albuquerque Public School District leadership with Mr. Scott Elder, the school board members, the newly elected officials, the APS Teacher Learning Network, Taylor Meyer, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Courtney Grant. Without your assistance, without your envisioning, without your purposeful mindset of bringing us together in this realm of education, we're all in it together. I'm not in it by myself. I know I have your support and I have your back as well. This is a very opportune time as we're closing in on the day of giving thanks, however your culture celebrates. We must be reminded that our cultures bring us together, not to talk about the Super Bowl upcoming, not to talk about who's playing football, though that's a part of it. Is to give from our inside up here, heart, mind, body, spirit, because in APS we teach to the whole child, not just to the cognition, but the whole child. And that's my perspective as you are filling in part of my education, and I will give you as much. This is not a complete system that I'm going to give you. You have your methodology, you have your pedagogy. But this is just a super time to come and give thanks for the knowledge that we've been blessed with, whomever your creator is. So I prayed for you this morning that we will stay focused, that will put aside the 3 C's I talk about: no condemnation, no criticizing, no complaining. Oh, the weather is, no, you don't have no control over the weather. I don't. Well, we do have control over our mindset. It could be very positive or it could be very negative. So I think we're in the midst of a major mind shift in education. At the state level, I also work with the legislators speaking on behalf of bilingualism, multiculturalism, equitable education, social justice, and the other stuff that, we could spend another platform on that. But this morning, we're talking about amplifying our community voices. I thank all of you for participating and allowing me to speak, allowing me to greet you in my language, and we'll build upon that. And likewise, I hope that we can continue this collaboration, this team building, because we're all in it together. We put all the policies aside. Underneath every policy and under every curriculum, under every textbook is the child. We're all child-centered because we're advocates. whether it's from the lens of my Native American mindset or your wherever your position is. And we're not in this field of education because education is not static. We're in it to make a very positive impact on the lives of children from pre-K all the way to, what we expect is our higher numbers of graduates from Albuquerque Public Schools, whether the charter schools, whether it's the Career Enrichment Center slash early college academy, where I teach my Zuni language and do a lot of leadership with the administration. The administration are very positive to allow Indigenous studies to develop, and we're building programs, and it's a great time to be in education. So again, thank yourself. Find time at the end of the day to have your Java, however you relax. You have to take care of this. You have to take this. Do a lot of this. However you do that, 3 R's. I'll start and then I'll continue. One of my professors, who was a Comanche professor, Dr. John Tipiconic III, emeritus professor now, I believe he's in California, he said, Bernard, you're going into leadership. As I prepare myself to become a principal back home in Zuni, you will have to intentionally, purposefully do the 3 R's. I'm like, 3 R's, okay, reading, writing, and all this. No, he said, listen to me. And that was one thing he really expected us to listen carefully when anybody's teaching you something, especially an elder. Make sure you find a tree. I'm like, a tree? Find your favorite tree or a rock or a quiet place to reflect. So this afternoon or this evening or late at night, as you're reading or you're retiring, reflect on what you learned from not just myself, but you're going to meet other colleagues throughout the day through this amplifying community voices time. Reflect on something positive. Let go of the negative. Sometimes we build too much on that and we become unfocused. Review the things that you're learning with your colleagues, and then renew yourself. Of course, essential is sleep, exercise, eating the right things. And I have to remind myself of those 3 R's. So reflection, review, renew. Because if we don't renew ourselves daily, how can we empower the children, our colleagues, our departments, our Albuquerque Public School District organization that we have invested our time with? And so I thank you again. I'm filled with gratitude this morning that I, as a Native American, am giving back. And we'll touch upon that. Some of you may have heard my previous presentations that will visit the truths of the past. And then we'll renew ourselves, and then we'll take a look at how do we support each other from the lens, from the perspective of a Native American educator, and so forth. So at this time, I'm going to share my presentation, and I welcome all of you to this time of gathering as we get closer to the time of Thanksgiving, which is coming up in just a week, and it's been pretty fast. I mean, it came upon us. We'll affirm, we'll perpetuate, we'll validate Indigenous, those people that were living already on some of our cultures. We talk about Turtle Island, Native American students. That's the investment that we're all making. And maybe you only have 1 or 2, but you also have an impact on those, bringing in their culture and languages. I want to spend about 30 seconds just remembering somebody that was impacted by COVID this past 3 years. Remember the youth, the family, the friends, and especially from my perspective as an elder, as a native language teacher, some of our languages are not written. So we've lost some of our elders who had wisdom, discernment, and advice. They're not with us this morning, as you and I are very blessed to have that life still in us to continue teaching leadership. To spend a couple 30 seconds and we'll get back. Pray in your special way. I'm going to pray right now. Blessings to you as you continue in this gathering today, this morning. Thank you. We're here to improve the outcomes of all students, regardless of culture, languages, backgrounds, immigrants, bilingual learners, multi learners, families, community members, and we are here to give them the best opportunity as they go through the classrooms, as they continue to be a part of the Albuquerque public schools and the classrooms, to honor the diversity throughout New Mexico. A quick look at my credentials here, though they are not important. I don't tout them. I don't put them on the marquee. That's just my way of telling you that I am highly qualified to share with you my knowledge. My experiences are important. Currently, I'm the K through 12 Zuni language teacher with the Albuquerque Public School Indian Education Department. Currently, I'm teaching with the Early College Academy / Career Enrichment Center. I'm also adjunct instructor for IAIA in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's the American Indian Arts dual credit program for our high school students. My experiences, I have been with the Cibola High School, Del Norte High School. I have also taught elementary children in the past 6 years at Emerson, Hodgen, Governor Bent, and I started my principalship with the Zuni Public School District at a high school, and I also was a teacher where I started my student teaching at the second grade level. I love those second graders because they still hold your hand and want to be held. But right now, we'll do a lot of fist bumping and elbow greetings. I have also some experience with the Native American Community Academy. That's the charter school under the umbrella of the Albuquerque Public School District. And I also work with the Bureau of Indian Education, which was my last self-contained classroom teaching all subjects at the Isleta Elementary School in the Pueblo of Zuni. Keshiko don awan tewa ke ho Bernard Chaimani ho shiwi ho kakali ko dan ho shahui toko awan chatle. Tsina yanik and ho APS aho itaas on tsina yanik and awili equanike ho Career Enrichment Center and shiwi bena yanik ella kwa. So you heard me do my official greeting to you, Keshi being hello, koton awan tewake. How have you spent the evening hours to the time that we have met? In just a moment, you'll see the response from you to me, and this is a teachable moment. In my culture, in my introductions, I acknowledged my late mother. By the way, she was a 25-year-old, I should say a veteran of education. She passed on at a very young age of 59 with problems of diabetes and had a stroke. But she's always with me. And her goal was to get her BS or BA, which she never did. So I'm doing it for my mother. And so my late mother comes from the Eagle clan. To the far right is my father, representative of my maternal and paternal clanships. In the middle of my two clans is our great seal of the Zuni tribe, who I represent. And in the middle, I'll start in the middle, is way in the bag is our sacred corn mesa called Toa Yalane. If you make a trip to our Pueblo of Zuni, you'll be greeted on the left side as you're coming in from the east to the Pueblo of Zuni, where our people lived for a period of time as colonization happened. cultural misunderstandings, cultural clashes, and we'll touch upon that in just a bit. In the middle is a basket with different colors. Colors represent the different directions in my culture. As the sun rose this morning, we greet Father Sun. The color that correlates to east is white. A new beginning, a new day to bring blessings. And yet sometimes blessings come with problems. And life does come with blessings, but problems, and we work through things together and sometimes individually. And then we go up north, which is Bishlan Quintana, and that's signified with the yellow corn. That's a correlation. To the west, which is where my roots are in Zuni, is the color blue. And then to the south is Ma'ka Quintana. Interestingly enough, we have our salt mine, and we talk about mother salt bringing us that mineral, and the color that's correlated to the south cardinal direction is red, Shiloah. Zunis are blessed as artisans, and not only that, but they have been gifted with other professions. But for now, we know that Zuni, I believe, make the best jewelry, inlay, and other patterns. In the middle are Zuni words. Ulohnan, the world, Toshanan, are all the seeds that we've been blessed with. Utenantehya, any other blessings are sacred. We reside, and that's where my roots come from. Some of our younger children, they ask, Mr. Chimney, who's that rainbow man? I said, the rainbow man is significant of the colors of people that now are a part of our community. And the blessings that are coming to us come from the spirit world. And down below are the stars, the galaxies, and the infinity of knowledge that goes forth from our hearts, our minds, our epistemologies, and our belief systems, our creation stories are all embedded in the solar, the lunar system. So that's the significance of the Pueblo of Zuni seal that I just shared with you. We have approximately, I believe, 16 clanships on our mother's clan and then our father's clan. And I'm looking at the left upper corner. That's a tobacco clan, bear clan, wild mustard seed, and another plant, parrot clan, crow clan, roadrunner clan, frog, turkey, and boy, this group does not like Thanksgiving because you know what we consume most of. And then is the badger clan, Doakwe, significance of how we've survived as farmers, agriculturalists, and that's kind of shifting from our historical perspective. But corn is used in sacred ways, in blessed ways, in ceremonies, and of course to enjoy corn during barbecues and different recipes that we use. Also, we have the crane, the sandhill crane. And interestingly enough, my late mother's and my father, who is 85, still living in Zuni, the clanships are together, Deer Clan and the Eagle Clan. Above the Deer Clan is the Coyote Clan, and the last one is the Sun Clan. So these are the representations of who we connect to. So if I mention my clanship, and an elder is listening to me, oh, you're my nephews or grandfathers. And so the lineage, the relationships is very important. So in your classrooms or in your workplaces, wherever you're working with Albuquerque Public Schools, find out if they have these clanships that you might come across. Yanikino are greetings. Again, using the American alphabetic principle, it was the 1940s into the 60s, early 70s that we finally had linguists that we warmly welcome to help us develop the written language now. So it's no longer oral, but we're able to articulate it in the written form. It says, Keshi, greetings, welcome. How have you been since the last time I saw you? And so out of respect, of course, we will greet our students every morning. I do, sometimes in the afternoon if I have afternoon classes. For now, out of respect for health reasons, we know we've been doing a lot of fist bumping and elbows together. So your response to me, if I said Keshi, and you as a participant would say Ketsanishi. Ketsanishi. So you can work on that throughout the day. Ketsanishi. I believe it's Ketsanishi. 4-syllable word. Say, happily I greet you, Mr. Chaimini. So in this greeting, we mentioned our name, Shi'ine, our maternal, paternal clans, Anno Diwe, and then sometimes we'll reference our grandparents and parents. Interestingly enough, when I pronounce Nana, that's more like the Hispanic culture in their vocabulary, in their linguistic sounds. But in our, and sometimes I've been asking my elders, did we borrow this? Did we not have a word? Maybe we borrowed it and mistook it, because when I was working at the Islada Elementary School, I had my 5th graders, my last group of students, they just had a rip-roaring time. Why is your grandfather female? So I had to do some explaining this, that in our culture, Nana is a man who represents our grandfathers, either on the maternal or paternal sides. I just mentioned where I work. I teach at the Career Enrichment Center just south of Albuquerque High School. Location of employment. Some of you might be very familiar. You might have attended some cultural events in Zuni. Right now, it's very iffy with the COVID numbers rising. Even myself, I have to call to my governor's office. Are there roadblocks? But knowing that I have my COVID shots, I probably will be welcome back to my roots, my homelands. If you reference my community, the membership, Shiwi, like Shiwi, not Zuni with a little N, and I'll explain why. Shiwi, in a farming village, we had about 6 to 8 separate farming villages that surrounded the main pueblo of Zuni. Zuni was built 5 stories high, and on special occasions, on important occasions, we had one community announcer going to the 5th top level of our middle of the village and yelling out, there's an emergency, there's flooding, there's a certain event happening. Then the colonization happened. We were one of the first pueblos. We were the first pueblo that the colonizers met. Cultural clashes, cultural misunderstandings, invalid assumptions. And according to what I've been told, and a Black person, maybe the first ever that was seen by my people, in a village called Hawiku. Hawiku has been excavated, has been burnt down. It's no longer there. You won't even know that there was a village out 15 miles west of Zuni, Shiwin. So the colonizers came, continued their travels out towards east, towards what is now present day Sky City, known as Acoma. In my language, in my culture, we call them Hagukwe. The colonizers say, who was that group that we had a confrontation with? Acoma people, Hagukwe say, and probably through translators, Sunitha, Sunitha. Thus, our name was changed from Ashiri in the textbooks as Zuni. So when I talk about Shiwin with that yellow arrow to reference about the geographic location, we're about 30 miles west of Arizona. Arizona, parts of it used to be our Aboriginal homelands for hunting. for gathering plants, for learning about science and all the environment that happened within the boundaries of where the McKinley County border lines are now. If you have not been, if you have, you're probably going to travel 2.5 to 3 hours west on I-40, hang a left in the city of Gallup, is known as the Indian capital of the world. So not too far off. If you feel like traveling, again, check with our Pueblo leaders before visiting. We do warmly welcome you during the celebrations throughout the year. Some are closed to non-Zunis. I would say probably 3/4 of the year it's open to visiting, buying jewelry, pottery, food, and so forth. But just be careful during this COVID time. The two signs were made by our young people. It was a youth conservation corps back in 1981. The one in the left corner is you're just leaving Rama or Rama, however you pronounce it, a Mormon community. And then you come on to our homelands from the east to the west. The right corner picture is leaving Gallup and entering our homelands to the Pueblo of Zuni. I'm going to take a moment to honor my past, our past. So we're now doing some historical, looking through the lens of probably middle of 1800s. So as educators in APS, I want you to kind of put yourself on top of the fifth level of our community. We're now looking from the north to the south. Look at the ladders, look at architecture. And I can surmise that there's language being taught. The grandmothers, paternal, maternal, are doing some cooking, corn grinding, pottery making, linguistic, cultural capital happening right in front. This, I think, was the first charter schools that we created. And sometimes we don't get recognition for the value that we have in our histories, our epistemologies. We also have our leadership. Our former leadership consisted of being appointed yearly, not every 4 years, but there has been a shift during the 1970s where we now have a democratic process. We do have voting machines, popular vote wins, and there's gender equity where females do have political offices. They are officials right now. I believe there is one female council person, and we acknowledge them. This is a photo of what our tribal leaders look like. By the way, one of the, I think it was an ethnologist that actually lived among our Zunis and pros and cons, wrote about the ways of life, of listening to stories, and of course penned it, wrote stuff down. And then he surprisingly took this group, these 6 traditional leaders traveled all the way to Washington, D.C. And that was their first exposure to the East Coast. And they did some traditional gathering ocean water, the belief system, thinking that if we bring ocean water, that will bring more rain. And of course, we do our traditional dances and prayers as well. But that's a picture from the time they went to go to D.C. Now we're looking in the middle of the village towards north, towards Gallup. There's a Zuni elder probably getting ready to go attend some religious activities. And I call that another type of schooling. But again, look at the structures. We're now in the middle, top 5th level, looking towards Corn Mesa. Corn Mesa in my language is a Doa. Yalan. Yalan is not a mountain, it's a mesa. Corn, white corn mesa. The colonizers came, and out of fear of being exterminated, of being get rid of, we lived on top of the mesa for a period of time. To the north of the mesa is a water supply. There's aquifers underneath. There's actually, if you go visit it, there's springs that are kind of like bubbling. And then to the south is also a source of water. So our people were able to collect water and and survive. There are a few ruins up there, but if you come visit, ask for permission before you go sightseeing. Again, the structures, I'm sure we had our ways of knowing, measuring, math, trigonometry, geometry, lining up. I mean, everything's in here. And it's mind-boggling that we didn't have to go to school in academics. We had the knowledge to build these complex communities. And here is probably a photo from, I want to say, mid-60s. Let's see if I can get my laser right here. This is where I grew up on the south side, right near the river, near the environment of the river. We did our learning outdoors. I can really call it organic. My grandfather, through the ethic of care, would take us on field trips. And that was the best schooling I had. We would explore these hills, go rabbit hunting, collect plants that were edible, and began to know our environment quite well. So those were my environmental studies. Later on, he would take us to these hills to explore, and he, in fact, let us go swimming in what used to be the Zuni River. It's now down to a trickle. So that's where I grew up. I grew up in an extended family of 11 people that consisted of my maternal grandparents, my father and mother, 3 siblings, and myself. So the 4 of us, and then my auntie and her husband, and the rest, which totaled 11 people in one household. We ate together, we learned together, we fought together, we cried together, but it was the best part of being a member of my family. As much as you are representatives of your own community, however small or large a family that you have, that you bring that knowledge into the classroom as leaders, as teachers. And so this is where my knowledge base comes from. And again, a nice picture of a black and white photo of Toa Yalan. As a young child, I was expected to help my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. We lived in using the measurement of maybe like 2 blocks from the river, from this, what we used to call the waffle gardens. This was a unique way, and I still do my planting this way. The reason why we did that was we knew the conservation of water was important, because sometimes we would have very dry weather patterns. But during this period that I was growing up in the early 60s, we had a very nice flowing river. So we would take pottery jars, go down to the river, collect water, bring it back to grandmother as they're planting seeds in the spring, and they would put the water in the waffle gardens. And there's some onions growing right in front, and I'm sure grandfather or uncle and the brother might be in the back, just watching. And the fence is made out of juniper poles to keep the sheep and cows, maybe a few pigs that are living down near the river. So we knew about science, we knew about math, and just all that stuff that we know that learning happens in our classrooms. 2 young Zuni ladies that are proud that they grew their own food. It could be cilantro that was brought in by the colonizers, and other plants that maybe we didn't have that now became edible. And when I think about sometimes how stressed we are living in the city on the interstates, and constant agenda, sometimes an unscripted, unknown agenda, and then I take time to look at these photos, and wow, that was so relaxing. So today, I know that the weather's gotten cold. It's not the season to plant. Go outside, enjoy nature, refresh yourself, and enlighten yourself. However, you respect nature. My people grew up without too much stress. Indigenous Native Americans, as we're sometimes referred to, American Indians, the colonizers labeled us Pueblo, living in tight knit communities, as you saw in the building, the structures. Ahoite is a word that in my language talks about other indigenous Native American, American Indians living in what we call sometimes Turtle Island, what eventually became United States of America. Pottery, if you want the best pottery, come visit Zuni. There are people that will welcome you as they're making pottery, probably for a good price. So we've done a little side trip historically, looking at the not everything, but sharing with you my knowledge base, my experiences growing up. My roots are still embedded. So as a young child, when I was born, my aunties, whoever was responsible, would cut the umbilical cord. And in the house that I showed you, my umbilical cord has probably become part of the earth now. Children's umbilical cords are buried in the homes where they were born. So we might have shifted away from that thought, but that's where my umbilical cord is. And I think you've heard the words, from dust you came, from dust you shall return. And hopefully we don't turn into mud. So we'll leave Zuni for a little bit and explore the other 19 groups of us known as Indigenous Native American tribes, nations within a nation. Interestingly enough, our original names to name ourselves were changed by the colonizers. So again, Zuni is not Zuni, it's Ashiwi, the people of the nation that's near the border of Arizona. And if you take a look at the right side in education, if you go to a lot of ed meetings, they might say schools in region 1, schools in region 3 and 2, representative of the different groups of people like myself. There are 19 groups of us, and then I will also reference the Diné, who are the Navajo. Within my APS Indian Education Department, we now have, I believe, 3 Navajo language teachers that I collaborate with, I work with, and I learn from them as well. We also have the Northern Mescalero and Southern Mescalero Apache nations. I will send this PowerPoint to APS. Social studies teachers, whatever you want to use this information, you are more than welcome to do that. I've already laid out and broke down the dialects. Zuni by itself is a language isolate. I am not able to communicate with the Keres, the Tiwa, Tewa, or the Toa. Each has its unique dialect. So Ashui, again, is referencing my group of people. Acoma, Laguna, Santa Ana, San Felipe, Santo Domingo, by the way, is known as Kiwa. And I think their preference is Kiwa. So if you do social studies teaching, make sure you include that Kiwa. It's the original name. Zia, Cochiti, Isleta has Satiwa separated by Albuquerque, and I believe that used to be one large Pueblo community. But the Duke of Albuquerque explorers divided that indigenous country, split it in half, and thus the northern and southern Tiwa. Pickery Pueblo and Taos are the most northern pueblos. Nambe, Poake, San Ildefonso, Oke Awinge, Santa Clara, Tasuki represent the Tewa, and again, a language isolate, which is the Toa, being the Jemez Pueblo. Being respectful of the Diné, the Navajo Nation, they're geographically mostly located around Window Rock, Arizona, near the Gallup area. Just to the south of us in Socorro, along the western side of the Navajo, the Alamo Navajo Band. As we know history, the Navajo tribe, the nation was gathered up by the cavalry and placed as prisoners in Fort Sumner. Upon release of the Navajo Band, some started to live among the Pueblos. Alamo separated itself and now is its own Navajo Band. And just to the west of us, I believe 45 miles west is the Tohajali Navajo Band. And the closest to my community back home in Zuni is the Rema Navajo Band. And I think we acknowledged earlier Mescalero up north, or excuse me, Mescalero is south. Hikaria is in the northern part. So a little bit about history of what we have gathered um, from history. I pray that history does not repeat itself throughout the American colonization of Turtle Island, because we know that we're going to move beyond. And I was just listening to some of the topics that the Indian Ed Department is having, the nation to nation, tribal governor to governor, educational policies that are being made are shifting, and especially to be listening for the Martinez slash Yazzie lawsuit versus New Mexico Public Education Department, State Department, to be looking forward to what positive outcomes will affect our classrooms, what will affect Albuquerque Public Schools. But we also have to keep moving forward. We can't stay and blame each other. I don't blame any of you, and I don't blame myself for anything, but I'm moving ahead and preparing our future, because we are given that responsibility to teach our young children to give them the best education that we can through the systems that we provide. But as I mentioned earlier, there were cultural confrontations, there were cultural clashes. I call those invalid assumptions. I think you are less than a human being. I think you're an Indian problem, but I think otherwise in the 21st century. But historically, one of the main things they wanted to eradicate was my native language and the other indigenous nations that some of them are gone because of this. But do I blame the others? No. We learn from this and we become stronger, and we teach each other that we shall not continue in that mindset. We've been seen as an Indian problem throughout history, in textbooks, in videos, and whatnot. The John Wayne movies, and sometimes I get so tired of it that maybe I should have a lawsuit against them. But who am I to even be bringing that up? Within the interior, we were seen as inferior, as savages. We had no cultural, linguistic capital. We always had a deficit model, while the others had a strength-based model. They're English only, linguistic authority. I'm superior. I'm more civilized. You live in an adobe house, and I don't think there's value. I said that's not my fault. So they came up with, the United States government came up with 3 ways, focusing on land, law, and education, to solve the Indian problem. Well, we know that the United States government was going to cost them too much money to rid of us. And teasingly, I found this big chief note tablet that's kind of cynical, but I used to go to school in my elementary boarding school days. But for now, since I'm a Penn State grad, I put property of Bernard, Penn State School, and I'm a smart Indian, not an Indian problem. And another policy that came to play was under President Andrew Jackson. Hey, let's remove all the Indian problems. Removal Act was enforced. And this little map here, of course, is the one of the famous removal of Cherokee people, the long trail of tears. So sometimes, what if the other people experience that? What if? But I can't change history, and let's don't repeat history again. This individual under the military department, Department of War, had this concept. Maybe I will get more money. I can't continue to fight the Indians. I'm a former Indian fighter. My philosophy mindset will be education through assimilation. Well, there are other shun things that came up. Shunning the native culture and language, shunning us and calling us Indian problems. Kill the Indian, save the man. Well, that didn't work. I'm still here. I'm sorry. I had a chance to, under my studies at Penn State, to go visit the original Carlisle Industrial Boarding School in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And I put myself in the situation of these native people, my brothers and sisters of long ago, during the 1800s, during the time when they thought that it would benefit to forcibly remove the peoples of Turtle Island, still wrapped in their warm blankets, removing them, putting them in wagons and then onto the train and whatever distance. For me to get to Pennsylvania from Albuquerque would take me about 2.5 days. And I thought about these children, my brothers and sisters, that were forcibly taken. Eventually, some willingly said, well, I think I need my children to become educated. But we know that females were also purposefully and intentionally rounded up um, and taken to the non-reservation boarding school. This was the first one ever, meaning they were not on our homelands, but at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas is one of them. And again, Carlisle Indian Boarding School was one of them. Just a compare and contrast of stripping people of their identity. I bet you their self-esteem, they're not happy campers, attempting to turn them into little military people, subjecting them to rules, regulations, and shunning them during the forced assimilation. I feel for this young child right here holding a doll. I can't imagine being these children, looking into maybe a camera for the first time, wondering what happened to their hair, wondering why they look like boys more than girls, and wearing the dresses. And of course, the whole concept was to strip the young people of everything. And unfortunately, the only job they could get were to be housekeepers for non-native families out on the the East Coast. Eventually, they were allowed to learn, allowed to become nurses and medical doctors, philosophers, professors. So these ideas were experienced, and these people, my brothers and sisters, lived out being shamed, embarrassed, insulted. And I surmise, I predict that this was language shifting rapidly. For that reason, in this present 2021, in the past 5, almost 6 years, I shifted out of being a principal from Zuni Public Schools to become a language teacher, because our languages in the native indigenous state of New Mexico, we're starting to lose our identity, our Aboriginal languages. So that's my purpose, intentionally bringing back the cultural and linguistic capital. And these buildings are still there, but these children are not. I'm sure the generations of their grandchildren are somewhere in the United States of America. So we honor and remember our children. There's a local incident here at the old Albuquerque Indian boarding school. There's some places where children are still buried. So please honor them, be respectful as they are being sent home if they're identified. But we know that some of them never returned home. But when I was doing my studies, there were 186 Native students, some unknown for whatever reason. They never kept accurate records. I would think that they would have, under the policies of now, returning these children back to their home. But we know that a lot of them died before ever returning to see their parents and extended family members. So as we continue to teach each other, sometimes we do not look at underneath the cultural iceberg, the stuff that we don't share right off. So as classroom teachers, administrators, take some time, have coffee together, have a tamale, have a fry bread, and start looking and listening to the less visible, and work very hard not to make the invalid assumptions. And I also, as a native, have to be respectful of the cultural iceberg. And sometimes we make quick judgments and live life that way, but we should not. We know that culture is not just religion. It's anything and everything that you represent in this meeting. Myself, as well as a Native American, American Indian, specifically Shiwi. We said Zuni is representative of who I am in that particular language. We have our whole belief systems, our epistemologies. And I don't think that I alluded to the fact that the Zuni Ashui have their creation story, that we come from the fourth underground world near Grand Canyon, that we traveled up the ladder to the third level, to the second, finally to the first level, as time evolutioned, as time shifted, as life happened. And then this incredible insect, a water strider, went looking for the perfect middle space. And that's taking you back to those pictures of yesteryear of Zuni Pueblo. In our language, that's called the middle place. Itiwan, halona itiwan. That's where my roots are. So that's a quick reference to the evolution of our people. So we will continue to bring native language into the classroom. Learn your students' language. It doesn't have to necessarily be Native Americans. We're now in a shift as history is happening. We will have more people from south of the border and others that want the same freedom that you and I have to get as much education, but we must understand their history and culture through culturally responsive teaching, methodology, pedagogy, and bring community culture into the classroom. Include your family, however you want to do that. Be respectful of them. Do invite them. Sometimes our Native families just need that phone call, that email, personally invite them. Would you like to be a presenter? Would you like to share your knowledge? Maybe it's art, maybe it's music, whatever that is represented of them, so that we do have a culturally responsive classroom. I'm not going to read everything, but I think we should all look through these three lenses to take a look at multicultural education as it is in New Mexico. We're hearing a lot of social justice. This is not the beginning nor the ending. We'll continue to expound on that so that we do have culturally responsive education through our systems with the Albuquerque Public School District and other districts in New Mexico. Recently, I spent 3 days at the building on our linguistic and cultural capital to ensure equity, La Cosecha Conference in downtown Albuquerque. And I liked the theme. This is the way I want you to see our Native children and other cultures, other people. Children are the seed. We have that awesome responsibility to provide them the best education, and that's making an analogy to watering them through curriculum, through the best education that we can provide through them, whether it's technology, taking them on field trips, sharing them who you are, so that they begin to grow to become the leaders of today for the future. Because if we don't, somebody else will. And for the negative part, we don't want that to happen. And Tonio Lafabre, 2021, just last week, made the painting, the poster for La Cosecha, the harvest. And I'll read this for you because I love reading. It's almost like a poem. The harvest. The germinated seed begins its journey. Rooted in equity, the kernel will grow. The encapsulated fruit form and builds on the stalk of life, transformed in shape. It becomes a dimensional image of the influences cast upon it: language, music, art, and dance. Culture, it's education, if you will. Now, La Cosecha, Mia Shenakepa, in my language, the harvest time has come. Is the child developed enough to go from equity to equality and change the world's flow? Again, crediting Tonio Lafabre, 2021 poster. His poster was selected. His artwork was selected for the 2021 La Cosecha Dual Language Conference. So take time to learn about Indigenous Native American history. A simple analogy I have, take a American coin or any other coin, flip it, there's two sides. Whose story do you want to hear first? My story or your story? We all have stories to share, but we have to be intentional and purposeful about it. And one example is this amplifying community voices. What a awesome event that we're having till believe till 4:30. Come next week, we will all celebrate, not because a certain NFL team is playing football, not because we have the best turkey recipe, not because we have the best pumpkin pie, but truly give thanks from your culture. Wherever you're going to be, at your home, visiting, traveling, be respectful of the Native American history. That it is very sensitive in some cultures, especially on the East Coast and maybe here in New Mexico. But we know that Thanksgiving is celebrated in certain ways. And do support organizations within Albuquerque Public Schools advocating for rights of Indigenous Native American communities. And I am more than happy to be invited as an Indigenous guest speaker at any of your schools, your organizations within Albuquerque Public Schools, and I will work around my schedule. I don't claim to know everything, but I think I'm smart enough, not an Indian problem, as we've been told, to share with you my knowledge that I have as an educator, as a presenter, supporting bilingualism, multiculturalism, cultural language issues that we have in New Mexico. Do check out these references that I left for you towards the end of this presentation. You can hit these and they will take you to the sites of the New Mexico Public Education Department, specifically Indian Ed Department. I am a board member. I'm the vice president for the New Mexico Association for Bilingual Education. I warmly welcome you to our 47th Annual State Conference live. Again, depending on the COVID numbers, 3 days, April 7th through 9th, downtown Embassy Suites Hotel. And I left a link for you, and please join us. This is an excellent site owned by the 19 Pueblos right there, I believe, on 12th Street and I-40. It's the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. Every weekend, there are cultural dances, including community members from the Pueblo of Zuni. There are some brownback series you might be interested in through the American Indian Ed program at UNM. And I work with, and I do a lot of research with the Center for Applied Linguistics. Again, I left a link for you. I have to give credit to the National Association for Multicultural Education. And please do continue to do advocacy with these groups and learn more. I think I did a double slide on that one. Thank you very much for being a part of our Amplifying Community Voices. Thank you, Elakwa, for allowing me to share what I have as an educator, as a teacher, as a Indigenous Native American Zuni Shiwi teacher. If you want to contact me, the quickest way is bernard.chimney@aps.edu. Madison, thank you very much for that comment. Thank you for allowing me to share my knowledge with you. You guys are so awesome. Get awesomer and awesomer every day. And hopefully we will continue to meet together like this throughout the school year, and hopefully in person, share a cup of java. I'll bring some traditional tea from the backyard here, and I will send the recording to the leaders of this Amplifying Community Voices, and it will be posted later on. So again, if you have personal questions or anything that you would like to ask me later on, please send it to my email, bernard.chimney@aps.edu.